Hello class, my name is Brian Satterlin and today I will be going over my initial case study, which is testing and developing an intervention for increasing verbal mands. And this is for class SPC 638. So on our initial slide, I just wanted to go over the fact that for the sake of this project, I will be calling my client Bob, which is not their real name or anything close to it, and it has no implications over being a male or female. Just to kind of, keep everything aligned with HIPAA. None of the information in this project should be violating HIPAA. I have replaced names, no names of parents, no last names, no pictures, nothing like that. So Bob was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at 3 years old. Bob's parents wanted to get him into therapy as soon as possible as they were growing concerned with his lack of development. He started ABA therapy shortly after, about when he was 3.5 years old, just due to our intake process and unfortunately the waiting list we have going on right now. This is his first time in a clinical setting receiving services at all. And I just wanted to say he could make sounds, but did not use words or sentences functionally. Didn't request items by pointing or anything like that. His main form of manding was just grabbing for the item. A growing area of concern for the parents is his inability to request items. His form of manding is to grab for or reach for whatever item he is wanting and will refuse to point to the item. His behavior is being positively reinforced by the parents giving the item to Bob in hopes he will not start to tantrum or in hopes that it'll, make the tantrum shorter. One less thing for them to have to deal with, all the other things that may happen in a household when living with somebody with ASD. So after conversing with the parents and taking some information, once again, it seems like it was being maintained by positive reinforcement of immediately gaining access to the item. So the hypothesis really is that it is being maintained. It is a denied access behavior, which is being positively maintained by the access given to the items that Bob is requesting. So we initially provided the parents with a questionnaire about what happens in the home and out in the public. So this was just to get, a better idea or a better understanding of what the tantrum behaviors would look like and, what items it mainly is over. If it's something like this more than that, whether it's toys more than food or anything like that. They did let us know that it is mainly toys, and it can be out in public, more or less in the home. But they were letting me know, like, if Bob sees a toy that on the shelf that he may want, that it kind of goes into that same situation that, parents can't buy everything. So dealing with that denied access has been rough in, say, grocery stores like Target or Walmart, where they have a large toy selection. Um, One of the biggest concerns they have too, besides the inability to man for items, is the tantrums themselves. So the tantrums, as described to us, could be falling to the floor, crying, head banging, hitting themselves in the forehead. And if a peer or parent is too close in the vicinity, they may get dragged into that and could get some aggression towards them as well. After this, we moved to the ABLES, which was conducted in our classroom with no other children in it. And it was pretty much fully cleaned up except for the toys that Bob had pulled out. And then once again, the biggest behavior that we did run into, which I know is probably not a shock, is the tantrum behavior when we took items from him. Obviously, in the assessment process, we're trying to probe as many behaviors so we can develop a proper treatment plan or intervention plan individually for Bob. So initially, I collaborated with my supervisor, who is a BCBA at my current center. We developed almost like a hierarchy system to allow Bob to gain the skills to request items and hopefully minimize the tantrums that may occur. We initially start by pointing to the items he wanted, and it is given immediate access to said item after the point has happened. During baseline, Bob scored a 0 on the pointing intervention. when we started to use we then started to use least to most prompting, although it was quickly determined that full physical is where we had to start. After a couple sessions, we moved on to partial physical, and then lastly a gestural prompt, until Bob was ready to move on to pointing with a vocalization. So just kind of going more in depth, due to the complexity of this intervention, we were creating, and the severity it could change Bob and his family's life. We made sure to take our time and not rush any progress. We also, which I'll talk about later on the issue stage, we had an issue kind of making sure to keep everybody safe, so we didn't want to push too hard and have Bob injure himself or one of his peers. And then once again, we went through a similar process as the initial intervention by going through least to most prompting until he was independently pointing and using a vocalization. So by this point, he did have the pointing down, so it was mainly just prompting the vocalization. But that could be, just an estimate of the word. If it was a car, ka, something along those lines is perfectly fine to request for the item. Okay, and then this is kind of our last slide I have going over the intervention. So this intervention went hand in hand with other lessons Bob was working on. For example, we started off with simple echoics such as moo or dog. And this was just to, increase Bob's vocalizations, get him more comfortable producing sounds in a more functional way. I know saying dog or moo is not necessarily requesting an item, but once again, it's helping him get started using his words, getting more comfortable with speaking, in hopes to, kind of get away from the babbles and get more into formed words or sentences. So obviously the last lesson and kind of the whole goal of this PowerPoint and this presentation in our initial assessment was to get him to use one-word bands. And that's kind of where the end of the slide will go to. So I'll give you a few examples. So such as car, he would need to say car to receive the item. And, also with food. So like we did that a lot with, say, chips. You pull out 2 or 3 chips, have him say chips, wait for him to demand again saying chips, pull out 2 or 3 more, and kind of just continue that process until he was independently doing it. And I guess a really important thing too is to go over the fact that it was immediate. The second he would say chips, he was given access to chips. There was no delay. I think this was really important because that, was showing him that we're rewarding the manding. We're not rewarding something he does after the manding or blah, blah, blah. It's, say, manding for chips, we give him a chip. Right. And then this is just kind of going over the generalization. Manding in general is a very important skill for young learners to have. The autism diagnosis in many cases goes alongside with communication delays. This skill gives Bob the ability to communicate more effectively in his environment and minimize tantrums / maladaptive behaviors that could occur. This skill is the base for more complex behaviors such as 2 or 3 word manding, requesting to go to the potty, or even, say, in the future, ordering food at a drive-thru. And these are just things that Bob was unable to do before the initial intervention. So giving him skills, for the future, you never know. Maybe he'll go to high school or get a job somewhere where he will have to effectively communicate. And learning at such a young age is setting them up more for success in the future. Okay, and this was just going over the maintenance process, kind of like I said before, but, it's maintained by using new interventions. We have a requesting different food item, once again, that I was talking about on the last page. It really can be maintained by almost any form of communication, and I think the biggest thing is to be consistent. We can't, have this going heavy for a month, him manding for every item, and then all of a sudden we start, accepting the pull-in of items or just the pointing and everything once we've already developed the skills to request verbally. Okay, and then I know I touched on this earlier, but the main issues that arose during the intervention was the tantrum behavior that was associated with the mandate. So once again, it was a denied access behavior, and obviously we had to withhold the items until he could mand for them. The biggest issue, once again, was just making sure he was safe and the peers around him were also safe, and that nobody was getting injured just because of an intervention. And I just wanted to kind of close with, the nice thing is that our gross motor room is all padded. So the floors are padded pretty thick for the most part too. It would take a lot of energy to try to bruise yourself or physically hurt yourself on those type of floors. Okay, and then just lastly to show you the 2 references I used for this page. But thank you very much for listening to my PowerPoint. If you had any more questions about Bob or anything else that we do at my center, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.